Hi there, welcome to this week's Record Rangers podcast brought to you by NordVPN. I'm your host today, Douglas Dickie. I'm joined by my erstwhile colleagues, Fraser Wilson and Scott McDermott. How you doing, boys? You enjoying the World Cup?
Aye, it's been good, mate, I think. Obviously, I was lucky enough to be there for a few weeks covering Scotland. Still getting back to reality back home. But now I've been staying up to watch the games. England game was sensational there, I think, in terms of an occasion. And then you contrast it, Spain-Portugal last night was pretty disappointing. But now I think overall it's been a pretty good tournament. We'll not talk about FIFA controversies and Balogun and Trump and Infantino, but in terms of the actual football, I think it's been good.
Yeah, all that stuff's put me right off it. I was already not really enjoying it, to be honest, and that's just kind of tipped me over the edge. Although we did see a Rangers player shine on the big stage last night. We'll come to that in a wee bit. But this is the first podcast we've had in a few weeks, boys. So we're doing a bit of a catch up. We're going to have a wee look through Rangers transfer business so far. So just to recap, the ins we've had are Dan Neil, who's a free agent, most recently I think at Sunderland. Ivan Pandur, goalkeeper from Hull City, with Jack Butland going in the other direction. Ben Godfrey from Atalanta on loan, a defender. Lawrence Shanklin obviously was wrapped up quite a few weeks ago. We knew about that. And one that came as a bit of a surprise, a bit out of the blue, I think, was Ross McCrory, coming in from, returning to the club from Bristol City. In terms of outgoings, obviously, with, James Tavernier end his contract. Butland, as I said, away to Hull. Bailey Rice away to Kilmarnock on loan. And Ben Davies has joined Bolton on a free. A man who is etched in my brain for that time he hit a corner against Sparta Prague in the Europa League. That moment lives rent-free in my head. And I think the fact that that's his most memorable contribution in a Rangers shirt sums it up. So we'll move on. So, Fraser, it's still quite early in the transfer market. The transfer window, I said a few weeks ago, I thought the World Cup would slow things up, but Rangers have got a few players in already. What's your kind of take on how we're doing?
Just generally, when you put the ins and outs against each other like that, it seems balanced, but far more importantly, it seems like an upgrade instantly. The 5 you mentioned coming in against the 4 or 5 that have gone out, I don't think you can argue that's not an upgrade. And we'll go into each one individually, I'm sure. But what you've got in there, you've got a defender, you got a couple of midfielders, a right back, which was really pressing, a right back that Derek McInnes has previously worked with and called the Rolls Royce of a player, and the best striker in the Scottish Premiership last season. You've got leaders, ticks an awful lot of boxes. Players that know the league. I think it's a very good start. Don't forget we're nowhere near the middle of July yet. There must be a good 7 or 8 weeks left of this window. So just generally looking across the 5 signings and the work done so far, potentially the most important one being Derek McInnes coming in himself, I think it's a very good start.
Scott, I'll talk a bit about Ross McCrory. That one for me came right out the blue. If I'm being honest, my first reaction was he wasn't good enough the first time round. Why are we kind of bringing him back? But having had, some time to reflect on it, I won't pretend to watch a lot of, Bristol City. But from what I can gather, he's kind of reinvented himself. He's quite a solid right back. And when you compare him to, Tav's defensive frailties that get shown up really badly last season, and the fact that Dujon Sterling can't play 2 games in a row, without getting himself injured, it seemed like a decent, a kind of solid signing.
I think solid, steady, reliable. Those are all the kind of words you would use with Ross McCrory, Douglas. And from that point of view, I think a decent signing. I don't know about you, but I don't see Ross McCrory coming in and being Rangers' first choice right back every week. No, as a replacement for James Tavernier. As you say, you've obviously got Dujon Sterling still there. We're pretty certain that they were also trying to get Brian Reynolds in from Westerlo Tour Romans, old teammate. Rangers had a bid in for Reynolds, American international right back. It was accepted, and then they were just kind of blown out the water by Rennes. I'm not sure if he's actually signed for Rennes yet, but it looks as if that's where he's going to go. So I'm not convinced Rangers are finished looking at the fullback area to strengthen in general. Obviously, on the other side of the pitch, Romans will be first choice. They don't really have a backup left back yet. You're probably going right down to a young kid, Ashton Scally, who's really highly rated, but he's only 16, 17. So I expect more reinforcements in that area. As you say, with Sterling, you're not sure about his fitness. I think he's somebody that Derek McInnes might try and get a hold of individually, and Fraser will probably know a bit more about this than me, but I think last season what McInnes did with Craig Halkett, who had injury problems and was in and out of the team and couldn't find his best form, I think the manager probably has to try and do something like that with John Sterling. I think when Sterling plays and is at his best, he's a pretty good right back for Rangers. So I see McCrory. I think he'll be a key player for Rangers this season because he can play in different positions. As you say, he's so reliable. He's someone that McInnes really likes. He knows the club. He knows the demands, the expectations. I think he's got leadership skills, as you say, he's improved in the last couple of years at Bristol City. So I think he will be a key player, but whether he'll be a first choice every week, I'm not so sure. But in terms of an actual signing, I just steady, solid. And as Fraser says, I think in general that the guys that have come in, it's been a really promising start for them in the transfer window.
Douglas, Scott, just to balance what I said on Ross McCrory, that there's no getting away from the fact he's completely different type to Tavernier, and you are losing so many attacking stats.
Yeah,
with Tavernier, which Ross McCrory, for all his attributes, isn't going to match. He's, those crosses, those assists, and obviously the goals for a right back. So for that alone, I think you're bang on. They will be looking for another right back and potentially one that might actually start ahead of Ross McCrory. But I do think he's also he's a bit of a utility man, wasn't he, at Aberdeen, but he can go into a defensive midfield role. He can play a number of roles. So I do think he's a solid signing. But in terms of losing Tavernier's numbers, I think probably they will need to bring in a more attack-minded right back as well.
I think it's just going to be different for us. I mean, you're right. What you lose for Tavernier is obvious, but you look across the city, somebody like Alistair Johnson, who's a top player, proved that at the World Cup this summer, but he doesn't come up with loads of goals and loads of assists, but he's just a very good right back. And I think, listen, we've been over Tavernier and what he's given to Rangers over the years. He'll go down as one of the best signings the club's ever made in terms of value for money. But I think if you ask most Rangers fans, would you swap Tavernier's goals and assists for a few more league titles, then they'd probably taken it. They're probably taking the title. So I just think it's going to be different. It'll be different under McInnes. Tavernier's moved on. They're getting into a kind of new, or you would hope they're getting into a kind of new era. So I don't think the right back necessarily has to come up with 10, 15, 20 goals a season. I just think it'll be different. McCrory will certainly provide that. Sterling the same. But as I say, I don't think they're finished probably looking at the fullback area.
You're not going to replace Tavernier's attacking threat by bringing in any right back. It's as simple as that. You need to change the way you play. And I've seen it suggested that maybe having a more defensive-minded right back might suit somebody like Antman, who I think that's how, Oliver Antman, who's kind of the forgotten man, but someone who obviously we know has talent and has played well in Holland. Albeit, I'm always a bit wary of bringing in guys for the Dutch league because it's one of the slowest leagues in Europe, coming to one of the fastest leagues in Europe. But he's maybe had a year to settle in, and maybe having somebody behind him that's not going to be constantly overlapping him, might help somebody like Antman, who might be able to show a bit more going forward. So I think it was, in Moneyball they talk about how you can't replace like for like, but you can replace the aggregate. with different guys. So I think that's what we need to do with Tav. We can't just bring in one player to replace, Tavernier's statistics. We need to change the way we play. We need to develop the way we play. So I think McCrory's a sign of what we might expect in the full-back area. But as you boys say, I don't think that's the end of our transfer dealings there. Two new signings that, for me, if I'm being honest, have set off a few red flags. Are Dan Neil and Ben Godfrey.
Just a panic merchant.
I'm a panic merchant, mate. I'm a panic merchant. You've seen me at the tail end of last season. I was.
You want them out the door already? Aye.
I know.
No, listen. I am willing to give Derek McInnes 25 minutes of the first game at Paradise before I pass judgment on him. But but for me, and I'm not at all writing these guys off, but we don't have a great record of shopping in the English Championship. In my mind, and that's where Dan Neil's come from. We don't have a great record of taking players who've shown promise as youngsters. It's never maybe quite materialised, and that's what we're getting with Ben Godfrey, who hasn't played a lot of football over the past 2 or 3 years. I've heard really good things about Dan Neil, but I'm kind of burnt by previous dealings in the English Championship. I'm sometimes quite critical in the English Championship. I think it'd been quite an overrated league, and I don't think it's as comparable as Scotland as people make out. But I'm just wondering what you guys' thoughts on those two players are.
I actually agree with you in the Championship, Douglas. I know we're joking, but I'm the exact same. I think it gets overhyped at times, and I understand why. In Dan Neil's case, you're probably, what you're dying to say there is probably you're scarred by Joe Rothwell last summer. And listen, I get that and understand it, and there will be question marks around that. The only thing I'd say is, Dan Neil is a lot younger than Rothwell. I just think Rothwell coming to Scotland, I tell the story about Rothwell, or I heard the story about Rothwell after his first game at Fir Park, basically telling people around him, he just couldn't believe how quick it was. He couldn't believe how Motherwell played that day, that Russell Martin first league game. So he was kind of shocked by it, taken aback by it. But I don't think his age helped. Neil is a lot younger. I think he does get about the pitch. And look, you're right to question them because of the history Rangers have had with players in that league or players of that ilk. But no, you just need to judge them when you see them. On paper, they look like decent signings. Anyone you speak to about Dan Neil, guys that have worked with him, whether it's coaches or players, talk about how much a leader he is, even at a young age. They talk about how he can play different positions in midfield, how he likes to dictate the tempo of games, a real kind of controller in the middle of the park, which I think Rangers need. So, for Rangers' point of view, you just need to hope that it works out. There were clubs, a lot of clubs looking at him, a lot of clubs interested in him. But of course, time will tell. And Godfrey's the same. There are question marks over him as well. When a guy moves for, I think it was 12 million and then 20 million down south, you think he's got to have something about him. You look at those couple of seasons he had at Everton, of Norwich to Everton, and then in the Premier League with Everton. He did really well in big games. He gets 2 England caps. I think I was actually looking at it this morning. He started an England game, played the full 90 when it was their full squad, played with all the big guns down there. So he must have something about him. But there's no doubt, the move to Atalanta hasn't worked out. He's since had 2 loan moves, which haven't really worked out either, at Ipswich, Sheffield United. Obviously, the wee spare in Denmark as well, where he seemed to kind of get back on his feet again. But, of course, there's a worry that maybe his career is going in the wrong direction. But that's up to Rangers and Derek McInnes to try and fix that. And knowing McInnes as we do, he'll feel that he can do that. I mentioned what he did last season with guys like Halkett and others. So that's the big question mark over Godfrey. Can he get back to that level? That made him a 20 million Premier League player and going to Serie A. If they can, then Rangers have got a really good deal. Loan with an option to buy, not an obligation to buy, but an option to buy. So it could work out really well for them. But Listen, I think you're right to question these guys. The proof will be in the pudding once they start playing.
Fraser, what's your take on those two?
Immediately, like you said, when I was thinking this morning about the signings, Championship players have not worked at Rangers in recent years. You instantly think of Todd Cantwell. For me, absolute no chance. Kieran Dowell, not so great either. I'm glad Scott came up first here, because I've sat all morning trying to remember Joe Rothwell's second name. I just had a complete blank. And even sitting here before Scott spoke, I couldn't, that was impact he made. So no, 3 midfielders that just had just won nothing up here, produced nothing for me. So instantly the red flags were raised. But like Scott says, you've got to take each case on its own merit. So they've got to be given a chance. One thing I would say, Derek McInnes, from speaking to agents, from knowing Derek McInnes, is one of the most meticulous managers when it comes to signing players. He goes deep on their character, deep on what they'll bring off the park as much as on it, and then clearly, obviously, their attributes to fit into his type of team. So whether these are his signings or signings that were maybe already lined up or made by a recruitment team, I'm not sure yet. But if they're going to have to prove that they have the minerals to play for Rangers to get in a Derek McInnes team, otherwise they'll be nowhere near it. I mean, there was players at Hearts last year, a very bloated Hearts squad that got nowhere near the first team simply because they didn't fit what Derek McInnes sees as a requirement in the Scottish Premiership. So again, I still think there's maybe room for another signing in those positions. Certainly central defence. If Ben Godfrey doesn't really step up to the plate, I think looking at the type of defender Derek McInnes likes, and certainly had at Hearts last year, I don't think Rangers are blessed with him at the moment. So it's maybe another area that McInnes will be keen to bring at least one in.
I mean, Dan Neil's feels like we've been sniffing about Dan Neil for a while, so I would assume
there's a lot of excitement about him the last window, wasn't there, when he was linked? So he must have something. I've never seen him play, so I'll reserve judgment. But there certainly seemed to be a lot of excitement about him.
I'm just a bit wary because he obviously played a part in the promotion push and wasn't deemed good enough to play in the Premiership. So it's a kind of... Tom Lawrence is the one I always think of. You know, you guys are thinking of Joe Rothwell. I always think of Tom. You know, I'm thinking of a guy like Tom Lawrence who,
another one.
Puts up in the Championship and comes up here. But you know, again, Celtic have proven that there are gems in the Championship or in the lower leagues in England. In fact, we have as well. You know, picked up the likes of Joe Aribo for there. So there are guys at that level that you can get. So hopefully Dan Neil's more a Joe Aribo than a Tom Lawrence. Another boy we've bought for the Championship is our new goalkeeper, Ivan Pandur.
Ivor. I've made that mistake this week already. It's Ivor. It's quite hard to say.
I'm not even going to pretend that I know anything about him. I can't say when Hull are on that I rush to turn the channel over and watch them. But, you know, there's a bit of debate. You know, Jack Butland going... He's going to replace Butland. It feels like he's replacing, you know, one of the leadership groups. You know, one of the leadership group, a big character in the dressing room. But I don't think you'll get many fans shedding tears over Butland going. But, you know, there's also that worry that are we bringing in better than him? And I just don't know. I don't have a clue. I do not know what to expect for this boy at all. I'm hoping Scott has been watching Hull religiously over the past few weeks, tapes of them to give us an idea.
I hate to disappoint you, Douglas, but no, I haven't. No, I don't know. I must admit, I don't know too much about him. Only just obviously seen the clip since he signed. He's obviously with Croatia, or he was with Croatia at the World Cup, so he must have something about him. Played a big part by all accounts in Hull getting up to the Premier League, and we think, you know, for everything you read, it's only really kind of PSR rules in that have made it possible for Rangers to go and get him, because I think Hull had to offload some of their players. So just on Butland, I agree with you. Look, Jack Butland was a big character in the Rangers dressing room. Fraswell, I dealt with him at press conferences and that, same as myself, spoke really well. Always a brilliant kind of ambassador, I thought, for the club. A really good talker. and a really good goalkeeper on his day. But you touched on it there, Douglas. I just felt, at the end of last season, it was time to change goalkeepers for Rangers. Butland's never been able to kind of rediscover that form of his first year when he looked like he was going to be one of the club's best ever signings. I mean,
first 5 months, I'd even argue, Scott. I think even I don't know if he's ever put a year together.
Possibly. I mean, at the start of last season, he actually started to play. He started really well. And then I think about the big game at Tynecastle, was it when he made two big mistakes for goals that were really costly, and he just never got back to that kind of level. And I just think with Tavernier moving on as well, there had to be that kind of shift, that change. And I mentioned starting a new era. You're talking about a leadership group changing. I think that had to happen this summer with a new manager. Without being too harsh on these guys, they have been kind of riddled with failure in the last wee while at Rangers. And I'm not saying it's just down to them. It's to do with managers and recruitment and whatever else. But I think it was important that they changed goalkeeper. And look, you're right. We don't know if Pandur's going to be as good a keeper as Butland. You'd like to think the club have done their homework, and they will feel as if it's an upgrade. This boy's clearly got something about him, as I say, to the year he had last year at Hull and help get them promoted to get into the Croatia squad for the World Cup. He's got something about him. It's just how he adapts to life at Rangers, life in the Scottish Premiership. But I just think generally Rangers had to go and sign another goalkeeper. And again, on paper, and the proof will be in the pudding, but on paper it looks like a decent signing. And I just think overall the right thing to do was to swap them. That opportunity for Butland to go down there and to take Hull's keeper, it's probably quite rare that came up. So I think Rangers have jumped on it, and they'll feel they've got the better end of the deal, really.
Fraser, I did read one description of Pandur, a great shot stopper, not so good with the ball at his feet. Now, that to me could describe a certain Jack Butland, although Butland did throw in a few howlers in his time. Am I being harsh on goalkeepers? I kind of think being a good shot stopper is absolute bare minimum. Like, why would you have a goalkeeper who's not a good shot stopper like that?
Struggle to make a living if you're not.
That for me, it's like when they describe golfers as good ball strikers. Well, of course they are. So exactly. For me, you should be looking for a goalkeeper instead. Like, they should all be able to save shots. As one that can, that can command his area, can take pressure off his defence. When you've got teams bombarding you with long balls. And isn't going to just boot the ball at the park every time it comes to him, and he's going to get a bit of distance on it. So we don't really know what we're getting here, but I guess
you're
it's
right.
just
you're right. It's got to be the bare minimum is to be a good shot stopper. Then to the next level, you get your Alan McGregors that make the big saves, your Craig Gordons that make the big saves that you just
Alan McGregor was never good with the ball at his feet, ever.
Well, and this is my next point. Derek McInnes.
He was so good at shot
stopping. Scott will know where I'm coming from here. Derek McInnes isn't interested with his goalkeeper attributes and distribution until he ticks other boxes that you've mentioned. Big saves, command the box, have a presence, be loud, then distribute the ball. Probably in those levels. McInnes has said that a few times last season. I think he was a wee bit perturbed that the boy Callum Ward beat his goalie Alex Swallow to the PFA Scotland Team of the Year for those reasons. But, first and foremost, he wants a goalkeeper that's going to stop that ball going in his net and is going to command his area. A big presence. Don't forget, he had Andy Gorham in goals when he was winning 9 in a row at Rangers. So that's what he looks for. Just a right good foundation for the rest of the team to go and play. In terms of Pandur, I accidentally saw him a few times last season, and it was in March off the back of one of Scotty's articles on Ollie McBurney looking to get in the Scotland World Cup squad. So I thought, a couple of midweeks, I'm going to have a wee watch Ollie McBurney, see what he's up to. And I do remember one was against Wrexham because Dom Hyam was playing as well, and I think Ipswich was the other game. And I clearly remember the Hull goalkeeper, who I didn't really pay much attention who he was, being quite aggressive and cross balls. So I've also read a few things that he is 6'2", not the great big hulk that maybe Jack Butland was, but likes to come and attack cross balls. You've got to imagine he must be a good shot stopper, likes to command his area, 2 boxes ticked already. One thing I did notice was despite Hull getting up last season, there was only 3 teams conceded more goals than them in the Championship. They conceded 66 across the season. Now, I would hate to automatically lay that blame at the goalkeeper's door, but it's no great start when you look at it. More importantly, though, to flip it, when it came to the playoffs, he kept 3 clean sheets in both semi-finals and the final. So when the pressure was on, came up with 3 big clean sheets. So look, I'm going around the houses here, but bottom line is Hull, I don't think Hull wanted to lose him. It was kind of their financial fair play situation that forced them into this deal with Rangers. That's maybe why it came as such a surprise to Jack Butland. So if Hull wanted to keep him for the Premier League return, he must have something about him. He was in the Croatia World Cup squad. He's got to have something about him. So again, I agree with Scott. I think Jack Butland had a great season, a good season, and an instantly forgettable middle season at Rangers. He was a big presence, a big character, big boots to fill, but it was probably time to make the change, and you've got to trust that Pandur's the man to do it.
Boys, we'll move on quickly to some potential outgoings. One player who's getting talked about a lot is Nico Raskin. He's obviously been playing well for Belgium at the World Cup. I didn't wait up last night for it, I'll be honest, but I watched the highlights and he was obviously heavily involved in Belgium's first goal, and by the sounds of it, had a really, really good game. Scott will know I'm not Nico's biggest fan. I think he's underwhelmed at Rangers, considering the talent that we all know he has. And I think a partner of the ways is probably the right course of action. So should we start the bidding at 30 million, lads? What do we think? What we should be hoping for? And Scott, can you give us any insight as to what sort of clubs might be sniffing around?
I think we'll definitely be clubs sniffing around now, Douglas, after what he's done at the World Cup. I did stay up and watch the game last night, and he was excellent, really good. And I was actually sitting watching it, thinking, it's a bit crazy that I agree with you. I think Raskin should leave Rangers. I think for Rangers, it's the right time for him to go this summer. And that seems mad as you're sitting watching him. They'll pretty much control a World Cup last 16 game. Getting into the quarterfinals. But I agree with you on Raskin. I think he's been underwhelming at times. I don't think he has controlled games enough for Rangers in the Scottish Premiership, given the clear talent and ability that he's got. A few managers now have had kind of wee fallouts with him as well. We don't know the ins and outs of all of that, or who was to blame, or whatever. But say 2 or 3 managers have had question marks over him.
And at his former club as well, I think there was issues.
That's right.
So there's
there's a wee pattern there.
Who's the common denominator? Yeah,
I know. So I just think his contract, I think he's still got 2 years left. Everybody thought it was a year, but in actual fact, it's 2 years. You don't want to, from Rangers' point of view, you don't want to let that run down to a year. So I always thought this is getting back months that this summer would be the kind of optimum time. It always looked pretty certain he was going to be in the World Cup squad. I thought that's the time to try and cash in. And look, you're joking there about the price tag, but he's now starting games for Belgium. I mean, last night, De Bruyne and Van Aken and that were on the bench. Raskin was brought in because of the impact they had in the last round coming on. I think he's a certain starter for the quarter-final now against Spain. So, with 2 years left in his deal, I think you do need to be talking about 15, 20 million. Those are the kind of figures that you're going to be looking at. And for Rangers to get that, I think it'd be a brilliant deal. And it will help if they do get that kind of fee and he goes, it'll help Rangers, in terms of the budget to get more players in, because they do need more players in. Club spent, I think the financial accounts came out not long ago. I think the kind of net spend last year was 24-25 million to finish third in the league. That's just not good enough. So I think this is the perfect time for Rangers to cash in on Raskin. They'll be hoping he goes as far as possible in the tournament, because there will be clubs really interested. I think Premier League and in Europe will be looking at them and thinking we can go. And remember, especially Premier League, you're kind of 12-15 million. That's buttons to these Premier League clubs if they think they can get a Belgian international World Cup starter. So no, I would expect him to go. As you say, it just depends how much Rangers can get from him.
I mean, I guess it depends on whether clubs are buying the Belgian international Nico Raskin or the guy who plays for Rangers. It's two very different, prices for me, because before this World Cup, I was a bit like, we'd be lucky to get 12-13 million for him. But we've seen it before. World Cups inflate players' prices to the point where I'm now sitting there thinking, well, if we get how much for Calvin Bassey, we should be looking for maybe something similar with Nico Raskin. There's obviously another Rangers player still.
I certainly hope they go as far as they can in the World Cup, because they're my last sweepstake team standing. So go on, Raskin and the Belgians.
Well, Douglas, I mean, Celtic pay for Engels 11 million.
Yeah,
and they thought, Brendan Rodgers thought at that time that was a fair price for a guy his ability. I mean, I think Raskin has shown, he's a kind of level above that in terms of what he's done with Belgium so far. And you say, in terms of clubs looking at it, I think they do look at the international scene more than what he's done at Rangers. If you're a Premier League club, with due respect, you probably no care what he's done against Motherwell and St Mirren. They'll be looking at the World Cup, what he's doing alongside top players and against top players. And as I say, just looking at that game last night, as I say, it was really good. And I've been critical of Raskin, but last night in that company, he looked really comfortable and was one of their best players. Only came off very late on in the game when obviously the victory was sealed. So no, I think he's done himself no harm at all. And Rangers, I think, will be rubbing their hands. I think Rangers as a club probably knew this will be the summer to try and cash in. And it couldn't really went any better for them so far.
Just quickly, gents, there's another Rangers player still at the World Cup as well, Tilo Asgard. I just want to compliment him on his rowing action. It's been magnificent throughout. He did play one game, the single best individual performance of the whole tournament, even better than the guy that scored a hat-trick on the same day. But the reason I bring him up is I just, against all evidence to the contrary of what we've seen in Scotland, I can't help shake the feeling there's a player in there. And I don't know what you. I just don't know. I don't know what you guys think. Is he a guy? Another player we should be looking to maybe cash in on? The mood music appears to be that Derek McInnes wants to keep him. So, what can we expect from Tilo Asgard? Will he be a Rangers player next season?
Another enigma, isn't there? There's a few too many enigmas at Rangers now, and he's one of them. Norway international, big money moves, came up with decent pedigree. I think his first season, I'm being harsh, you saw more than me, Scott, but his first season was a failure.
You're not being harsh at all for us. No.
I saw him against Dundee United. I think I was at the game with you, Scott, the last time I saw Rangers last season, the 4-2 game, and he scored and he set up a couple. So I think I gave him Rangers man of the match that day, simply because he scored the goal and set up a couple. But it's as if he needs a rocket. It's as if he needs an injection. Come on, this is Scottish football. A bit more urgency. Derek McInnes will certainly demand it. No passengers in any of his teams. So I don't know if he fits into Derek McInnes' team. But Scott's seen him play more than me. I know he's shaking his head as well. So I'll let him take this one away.
Nah, I agree, Fraz. Nah, I don't think so, Douglas. I think Rangers will look to cash in on him as well this summer. if they can. Just he's only played one game at the World Cup, but just the fact that he's there and he's in the squad and he's playing a part might attract
cracking goal as well.
He did. I think, and he's already been linked. I think Atalanta. Atalanta seem to be linked to everybody right enough, but they've been linked with Asgard, and maybe Italian football might actually suit him better. As slower tempo. I think he struggled in the Scottish Premiership. I must admit. Fraser's right. Looks as if he needs a rocket every time he plays. He's been given big opportunities at Rangers, big games. Celtic Park, I think in the semi-final against Celtic, and he's just not done it. Doesn't look like he's suited to the game up here. And the shame is that he's actually he's got a bit of physicality about him in terms of his height and his power, but doesn't seem to use it to any great effect. And listen, I might be proved wrong. I'll be amazed if Asgard is a Derek McInnes type of player. Honestly, absolutely amazed. And Derek McInnes is a brilliant manager who will get the best out of people. And if he can do that with Asgard, fair play to him. But I think at his age, his profile, the international thing, this might be the chance for Rangers to try and claw back the money they paid for him. I think they paid around 3.5 for Luton when he got brought in. I think they'd be looking to try and get that back. As I say, I might be proved wrong, and maybe it is a wee bit harsh in terms of a player who's still fairly young coming into the Scottish game for the first time. People argue, you need to give him a kind of a season to settle in, but we all know you just don't get that. You don't get it at Rangers, and I think it's hard to kind of claw it back. So no, my gut feeling is if they can, and there are interested parties there, then they would look to try and cash in on him as well.
Yeah,
Championship curse again, Douglas.
Exactly. I mean, there's no doubt his talent. I think his mentality was in question last season, but we'll see going forward. I know I said that bit, but very, very quickly, Scott fans will be able to know there's some rumours surrounding Conor Barron potentially being on Bologna's radar. A story that I find incredibly hard to believe, but I think it is true. But I've been quite critical of Conor, although if every player on the team last season had his attitude, we would probably win the league. If every player on the team had his skill set, we definitely wouldn't have won the league, which we didn't, obviously. But can you shed any more light on that? And when are we parading Lewis Ferguson? That's a big question.
Well, that is a question. I think there is a bit interesting in Conor Barron that the Bologna thing's been mentioned for a while, and obviously with Ferguson being there, it makes things a lot more interesting. But I think we know that Rangers obviously have an interest in Lewis Ferguson. It seems pretty tentative at the moment, just because of the kind of fees involved and what it might take to get Ferguson out of Bologna. And there are big clubs in Italy, and I'm assuming in England as well, who would be interested if Lewis Ferguson's available, especially talking about guys impressing at the World Cup. I mean, Ferguson, I thought, was Scotland's standout player in a really poor campaign, but I mean, he was literally the only guy in the squad, I think, who actually enhanced his reputation at the World Cup. Well, I've probably said before a million times how much I rate Lewis Ferguson. He should have been at Rangers a lot sooner. It was a no-brainer for Rangers at a certain point. Like Lawrence Shankland, like a few others, they didn't do it for whatever reason, and they've kind of paid the price for that. I think it'd be a brilliant signing for them. Now, if Conor Barron could be used in some sort of deal with Bologna, that might be ideal for Rangers. Who knows? But I think it's still a fair bit, in terms of Ferguson, I think it's probably still a fair bit away. And we also know Rangers have a concrete interest in the Serbian boy at Partizan. Again, sitting midfielder, the 20-year-old captain of Partizan. I don't want to, well, I will try and pronounce it, Dragojevic, I think his surname is. They've definitely got a concrete interest there, and they're kind of trying to do that deal. So it'll be another central midfielder coming in the door. You think they've already got Barron, Raskin, Chukwani, Diomande, Asgard, Bayrami. So there's still a lot of movement to happen before the start of the season, or certainly by the end of the transfer window. So I think there will be more midfielders coming in. Whether it'll be Lewis Ferguson, I'm still not sure. But if there's interest in Barron again, I think Rangers would look to try and do a deal. No, they got him in on a free. If they could get some money for him, or potentially use him in a deal to try and get Lewis Ferguson, then I think it's something they would definitely look at.
Yeah, still maybe lack a wee bit of quality in those midfield, real quality difference makers in those midfield areas. But maybe that's a discussion for another day. Gents, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks to our sponsors at NordVPN. And hopefully we'll have some more new transfers to discuss next week. Cheers.